Left and right joins here. We talked about that. Basically, this means one of the tables is optional. Non-equijoins is basically when you're doing a join on something other than equality, usually less than, greater than type thing. Pretty uncommon actually. A non-equijoins are pretty uncommon, um, and yeah, I mean this really isn't even. I don't even think there's such a thing as an equijoin because it has to be done in a where clause. It's really an additional condition on the join. So you're matching on an equality. The actual join itself is here as equality, and then you're adding a where clause which does a non-equality statement with the less than sign. So I don't really even think an equijoin is a true type of join in my opinion. Delete statements. You could do it this way as well. You know, all of this delete stuff where it allows you to do multiple deletes. Um, no, that'll work in other databases. I shouldn't say that. It will work in other databases. You generally want to do that. That's kind of risky and advanced. We don't recommend certainly beginners to do that. Subqueries. We just went over subqueries. It's a query within a query. Basically, the innermost query executes first. Any questions on subqueries? Because that can be confusing as well. We went over an extra example. Oh, actually, did we? Oh, this is just the opposite. This gives you all the language for Finland, and we could have done this again with a join versus a subquery. Um, but a lot of times it's just a matter of what is more efficient, important as well. Yeah, I mean subqueries are kind of nice though. They especially MySQL allows you to use it in a lot more places than other databases do sometimes. You can use it right at the command prompt or the um, programming language. Correlated subquery. Now this is an interesting query. A correlated subquery simply means that there's correlation between the inner and outer query. Normally in a subquery, the inner query executes completely and then sends the results out to the outer query. That's the way it works. The inner one is done completely executed, and the results are sent to the outer one. In a correlated one, what we're doing is we're getting one row from the inner query, and then we're correlating it or joining it in some way to the outer query, and it's a back and forth between the two. It's almost like a real join, a traditional join. I'm not sure that a correlated subquery is more efficient than a join. You're almost better off doing a join this way, but it is there is correlation. So I mean, if you look at that query there, the outer query is C, the inner query is C2, and you can see how the inner query is referencing the outer query. That's correlation. Anytime you see that, the inner query referencing the outer query, that's a correlated subquery. Also somewhat advanced, and usually not necessary. Usually a join will work. All right, so another example of a subquery. Queries can only return a single value. Any, all, and some. I would ignore some because some is really the same as any, and the all and any are the ANSI standards. Some is just a MySQL creation. All right, it says right here again. Some is really the same as any. Questions on all or any? Anyone have a question? Okay, it's described in the videos, my old videos from last year. And then there's more examples here on all and any. In and not in, we used that earlier. We had the languages in our query. Right. And in and not in um, can be used in replacement of any or equal to any or not equal to any. And I generally prefer to use in or not in versus all or any. Um, exists and not exists. Now, this is an important one because exist is actually a limited subquery. It looks for the existence of whether there's a match or not between the two tables. A single match, one single match, and then it stops. It doesn't keep going. This is more efficient because if all you want to know is that whether or not the row from the outer query has an existing row in the inner query, the exist is the most efficient way to do it. Because once it finds a match, it stops, and then it moves on to the next. So in a way, these are correlated as well. Um, so it's definitely more efficient. Also, I wouldn't do a select star. I may need to fix that. Don't do a select star in an exist query. Just do select one, because all you're looking for is existence, whether there's a match or not. So you don't want to select a whole bunch of data out that you don't need to. The optimizer probably rewrites that as a select one anyway, but a select one would be much better, a constant. And I explained that down here, so that's important to understand as well. Does anyone have any questions on exist, not exist? It's a useful subquery. I use it all the time. You can use these things in where clauses as well. Subqueries can be used almost anywhere. Very useful. Yeah, again, more examples of it in the where clause. And you can match in the where clause multiple columns to multiple columns in the query. Yeah. So that's just fine as long as the number of uh, columns matches the number of values. That's fine. You can do that. So this is also a little more advanced. Any questions on that? Using them in the from clause. This is one place you can actually, essentially, when you put a subquery in the from clause, you're basically creating an ad hoc view for the purpose of that query. That's basically what this is, an ad hoc view. And you have to give it a name. You have to give it an alias. This is one of the times when an alias is required for a table in a select statement, is when you're doing this subquery, essentially creating an ad hoc view. And the reason you have to give it an alias is because you have no way of referencing it any other way. With a regular table, you could simply reference the table name. But with a subquery, you can't do that because there is no table name. It's an ad hoc view, basically. So this is one of a couple of places where you have to use a table alias. Now, the other place, and I probably didn't mention it when we were back there, that you have to use a table alias is with self joins, the employee table to itself, because that's the only way to distinguish between the two instances of that table. Any questions on that, using the alias and the self join? Is it being required? You can put something called a limit as well. This is important because if there's a lot of rows, you may only want the top 10 rows. So, good idea as well. Alright, so almost any subquery can be rewritten as a join. Left join, inner join, outer join. Almost any of them can be.